Hi everyone, my name is Azania from an organization called Locations Africa. And our main aim and probably the joy in my life is to promote Africa as a filming destination. So making sure that we have people from around the world coming to use our continent as a beautiful backdrop, a diverse backdrop, not just for the animals in a safari environment, but actually using it as a cosmopolitan environment, as a world-class destination of choice, right? We also promote the facilities and also the crew on the ground as to who's there, what facilities are available, what studios are available, what producers are available, what servicing agents are available, and also inter-country promotion as well, right? So it's not about South Africa carneying everything up to Ethiopia. It's about what's happening in Ethiopia such that South Africa, Rwanda, and anyone else can go into the environment and to be able to use the services that are there. And today, I mean, we have, being part of FAME, and I think just having the whole experience of MIP coming in to the continent is very strong and powerful for us, because I mean, if anyone has ever been to MIP TV or MIP.com or MIP Doc, we understand the stock exchange of content, and that's kind of where it lives. And so building a stock exchange of content here on the continent is also very, very, very good and informative for us. But I think for us today, my panelists here, I know on the program I had just my one name. I've got a phenomenal panel here, and it's made up of different parts of the continent. So it's not just South Africa we have here, we also have Nigeria, and we also have a representative here from Botswana as well. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction for everybody. I've got Zulu here from Nigeria, Zulu MOCAA. She's a producer. She's a phenomenal, I mean, just like Google her, okay? Google her. She's got a phenomenal kind of track record of 20 years working in the Nigerian film industry and a producer of note. Also huge into women empowerment, building platforms where women's voices across the continent are heard. Then we also have Julia here from Amazing Spaces. I mean, Julia has been promoting locations in South Africa, in the main, for a very long time. I mean, I remember I used to start getting her newsletters and thinking, what is this about? And she's a go-between between property and the actual film as well. And then I've got Denim. And as I was walking towards the stage, Denim just said, Google me. You don't need my profile. And I did, and IMDb popped up, and so Denim is here. And Denim is an actor, but I mean, I think more than that, Denim also is, he's a child of the continent from Nigeria, Cameroon, which I've just heard, and but based in Botswana in terms of the facility. So we're just going to kick right into it. And what we're discussing here is a title. It's called Exploring a Rich Diversity of African Locations. And funny enough, when you look at African locations and look at locations as a business, in the US, it's estimated that people can spend up to $250,000 a day on production, all right, on location. And when you times that by 30, 60 days, that's a huge chunk of your production budget. But yet we don't speak about what's happening on location in any one place. And that's why it becomes important that we have discussions about the value chain of what a shoot on location means. It's not about shooting in studio. It's about using the natural aesthetic of the environment, using the people on the ground, and also then it becomes a conversation of induced economies. So let me just kick right into it. Julia, you've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I think my first question, other than your profile of, being a child of a hospitality family and understanding what that means, why did you get into locations and promoting locations and being a facilitator on the ground in South Africa? What was your driving force? And follow up to that, what is your favorite type of location?
Okay, so the first question, I was actually unemployed and looking for a job, and through a connection managed to get a job stills producing a company called Cape Town Productions. I was freelance producing for them, and this was sort of 25 years ago, and in those days there was no such thing as a location agency. So, the scouts used to run around looking for locations. We was paging for all the magazines, the House and Leisure, trying to find locations. So I thought, hang on, there's a bit of a gap here. So aside from smaller production companies having access to locations to shoot, it was also about were the locations being protected? Was there a professional platform for them to showcase what they had to the broader industry? And obviously Cape Town being an international destination, I mean, in those days we didn't have an internet, can you believe? But, then getting locations out there to market them internationally for what incredible spaces we have in this country to market. That was the first question. The second question.
What is your favorite type?
Space?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd have to say beautiful homes, because that is the majority of our database. We do farms, restaurant, offices, you name it, we've got it. But I'm a bit of a sucker for a beautiful house, and meeting the people who create these homes is just so inspiring. I just meet incredible people who've created these inspiring spaces.
You know, the special thing about the home environment is that a location is not just this vast and big, wide. A location can literally be a window, okay? Mm-hmm. And that person peeping out of a window, that is a location all by itself. I mean, we look at films like Notting Hill, sorry, and that one blue door is probably London's most famous door outside of number 10 Downing Street, right? But either side of it, it just looks terrible. It's like it's a horrid environment, but that one blue door has become so famous, such that people actually do what they propose to their loved ones. And so when you start speaking about how do you then create those beautiful kind of one-off pieces, if you were to say in Nigeria, for instance, I mean, Inkblot has done so many productions, what kind of locations are repeated, and how is the locations industry within Nigeria? How is it sustainable?
Okay, so locations that have been repeated. You know, Nigeria is it's an industry. Nollywood is an industry that is heavily based on drama. So we have a lot of interior locations, like the homes, offices, very, very well represented. In every film, you would see a beautiful house of a very rich man. It's almost like, I don't know, you must have that in your film. But really, it's the stories that, of course, would determine the kinds of locations that you want to put in your films. In Nollywood, our locations industry isn't as buoyant, I think, as other industries across Africa. I think that people we just have individuals who run around scouting for locations for producers, right? But in the past 3-4 years, more people have started to make a company out of it. And I think that it also goes to show how well we're growing and how fast we're growing, and that very soon in the coming future, you would see that people have databases and all of that filled with locations for any producer to just go on there and just the ideal structure for productions to thrive with, yeah.
Yeah, and then being a thespian, being an actor, Denim, how important is it for you to immerse yourself in a location? Is it something that crosses your mind of the location you're going to be in as an actor? And then how does that translate to what you promote Botswana to be?
Yeah, so obviously locations are the show, it's the movie, right? So you have to have, that's the world that is being created, yeah. Right? So it's one of the first things that you see when you're conceptualizing a script, right? It's the locations, it's the world build, right? And so obviously on one hand, as an actor, the more believable the world is, the easier it is to kind of never really acting, you're just in the space, right? Just like we're in this space together, there's nothing that you have to turn on because everything's very believable. But on the other side of it, as a producer, right, and as a business person, it's also so important because you also have all these other factors that you have to be factoring into when you're getting into the locations aspect, right? We were talking about it a little bit, just about the, is the location conducive for people, right? Like, is it accessible, right? We have so many tremendously vast landscapes all over Africa, but then the question then becomes, can you get there? And in Botswana, we have some of the best locations in the world. I mean, I think the Delta was just, again, announced as like being one of the #1 places to go to in Africa. So we're really in Botswana, they're really, really known for their vast landscapes, not as much as like the giant mansions and things of that nature, but Botswana is known for that. And so it's the zebras and it's the elephants and it's all these other things. So for me as an actor, in one regard, it's great because you don't have to do that much work to get into kind of the whole space of everything. But on the other side, on the producing side of it, it's really a beautiful thing because it promotes so many different aspects of a country, right? So you're getting to promote tourism, you're getting to promote the hospitality industry. It's great for the country and usually for the governments of the country, right? Because now people are seeing this vast landscape, right? And that's one of the things I love about, especially shooting kind of outdoors on the continent, is because there's a lot of stuff, especially with online now, you get so much access to all these different international markets. And oftentimes without these types of outdoor, out time, like obviously these landscapes, you would never be able to see them, you know, by sitting in Los Angeles.
All right, so let me follow that up. As a producer, okay, what is a deciding factor for you to be on location and in a continent that is deemed difficult to work in? How do you get to decide that? Because let me tell you, as writers, sometimes writers write these elaborate stories and then they go on and it's an amazing journey and it goes, and then the producer says, well, scene number 62, 28, 29, 58 is going to be shot in one day, all right? And wardrobe is going to be changed in that moment and we're going to do night and day.
Yeah.
What is the deciding thing for you that says I'm going to shoot on this location? Does it backstop with you as a producer?
Well, I think it's a couple of things, right? Like how much does it drive the story, right? So number one, it's like, is it really story driven? Sometimes you do get writers that just get lost in their imagination, right? Because they're not handling the purse. So it's very easy just to like let your imagination run wild. And it's fun, but it's also like, you know, there's, you know, parameters, right, that you got to be able to fit into. But I think overall, one of the biggest things is like, how will we be able to house crew, right? Will we be able to get food into the location? Or do we have to use generators? Is there electricity? Like what are all these things that are conducive? And then when you're getting into the world of, we're going to shoot 5 different scenes or 5 different locations in one day, now you're also getting to the capacity building aspect of it, right? Like, do we have crew? Because essentially you're just turning into like a theater show because everything's like this, right? You get like 2 takes and then wardrobe change and then do something. Yeah. So I think more than anything, when it comes to locations, I think especially on the continent, when you're going, you have to be very committed, right? To saying, look, we need to make sure that if we're gonna go out to the Delta, we're understanding that in the script, maybe we are doing a movie or something, but we have maybe 5 scenes in the Delta. Instead of trying to do it for 3 days, let's just give it a week, right? So that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, but it's okay for that. But I also think that you have to give it enough time and space to build out the world in general. Otherwise, you run the risk of not properly showing the space in the way that it actually should be shown.
And Julia, as a locations agency, do you ever want to just say to the producer or the director, can you just show this side? Because it's beautiful over here. But what are the practicalities of selling a location? What does a property owner have to do? And how do you help that process along?
It's a good question, but the biggest thing is probably just communication and managing expectations. With regards to which is my best side, I mean, we can present great photos of any location, but ultimately the producer, the director, is going to go to location and do what we call a recce and check it out. But we have had situations where homeowners are really not understanding what a film shoot in particular is about. So, you know, you're going to get 70 people in, they want to earn the bucks and they don't necessarily want to put in the effort, because let's be frank, having 70 people in your home is quite a big thing. But we try and communicate and prep people as much as possible. And then, of course, we have anything from a small still shoot on location fashion with 15 people up to, we recently did the British Love Island series for 4.5 months on location. So, you know, you do get this vast disparity between what, is a reality, what people expect, and the size of production. But yeah, some people, I actually say to them, just go out for the day. Don't be in, if they see the mess that goes on location, rather just leave and come home when we've wrapped.
Yeah, we sometimes actually pay for a hotel for the owner to go and stay, just so you don't see what we're about to do to your house.
Yeah.
And then we restore everything back.
You have to restore it. I mean, there's a very big thing about restoration, right? Blood Diamonds, for instance, they shot in Pongolo in KZN. And sometimes productions are willing to spend the money to do the economic feasibility study if they know they can make it back, right? I mean, we had the same challenges with Mission Impossible that shot between Limpopo and KZN and in Mpumalanga, and having to understand the environmental impact of it all. So, I mean, in terms of what, with a Nollywood model, sometimes people just say, oh no, they're shooting 3 hours. It's not that it's not that quick, right?
No, it's not.
But how does it work? I mean, in South Africa we have permit systems, and we have a lot of kind of rigidness sometimes, but we have some form of process. Okay. But now you're shooting for what my mother adores. My mother will sit there and watch African Magic all day, every day. But she's always asking me, why is it, they seem to use the same environments, but how does it work within the Nollywood environment?
How it works in Nollywood is you go and knock on doors yourself.
You go and knock on doors yourself, okay?
Yes. So you get a location scout, and that person will go and knock on doors. Can we shoot in your house? Or if you have a cousin, a friend, a mother, somebody that you know, you would go and knock on their door, and you would request to shoot in their house. And then if you wanted to use state property, you would go and recce the space. And if you think it's what you want to use, then you go to for the state, the film office for the state, and they would give you a permit. It's relatively easy. No one actually hinders that. The problem that you kind of encounter in the end is when you start to shoot. You have your permits, right? But there are these, we call them omonile. That's literally translated to be child of the land, right? And so they would come around and demand sums from you. Oh, give us this. If not, we'll seize your camera, and this and the other. Wow. So you then have to come around with security, police, army, whatever it is, to make sure you have access to the location that you already have a permit for. And I mean, it's all part of the fun. It's annoying when it's happening, of course, but because we know that it's there, we put measures in place to just protect ourselves from that. And yeah, it's we love to shoot outside because, like I said, Nollywood is so drama heavy. So all the films you see is very interior. And then when you want to put scale into your films in Nollywood, you just have to go outside and you just have to, explore the states that you're in. So I don't know if anyone has seen Up North. That was shot in Bauchi, in Lagos, in the north. And that was just really beautiful. And when you have support from the government, it's even better, and it's easy. It's easy to get that support, but it just takes a long time, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, for us in Nollywood, we're used to doing things ourselves and knocking down doors and just going after what we want because we're passionate about what we're doing. And then in the end, we're proud of what we put out there, I guess. But yeah, things get done how we have kind of made it happen for ourselves. But ideally, there should be processes in place. Ideally, it should be easier for us to just have some kind of database, log in there, this is what we want to do, have the government say, okay, you go in there, have no Omaniles come to disturb you, you shoot and you leave. And it's also cheaper, so that's really ideal for us. But that's how it works in Nigeria. Okay.
So we recently did a tour of Mauritius and the east coast of South Africa, and what was nice about it is, it's probably an unfortunate thing. There is a writer's strike happening in the US. It is a actors' strike in support of what's happening with the writer's strike. So we were able to have access to location scouts who had done big films, and I think that the way that we have been underrepresented in the diversity of locations is quite sad. to be honest. So, I mean, even from a facilities point of view, so Khumo Studios, which Denim owns and runs in Botswana, is a facilities environment. Here we have things like media film, we have a whole bunch of others that are coming up, a burgeoning in Mauritius. They have light, a whole, equipment agencies. But from your side of things, from an equipment side, are we still under-resourced? What are the challenges? Where do we need to get to be able to match global needs in terms of servicing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think whenever we're getting into the equipment conversation, I think it's vastly understated, right? Because one of the first things that I would say, like even for an example, I was in Namibia last week, and I was talking to a lot of different kind of producers and things, and we noticed some of the same similarities. And like one of the biggest things is you don't have like a camera rental shop anywhere in the country, right? So if you're coming in from overseas with your camera, maybe you have a Blackmagic or a Red or whatever, and then as you're en route, a lens breaks. What are you supposed to do, right? So now you have to wait to get the shipment in, and then when the shipment comes, then it's got to go through customs, and then that has to wait at customs for 5 days, and so it's just not conducive, right? So it takes a tremendous amount of investment from an individual or a couple of individuals or a company that says, look, we're just gonna bring all this equipment in, right? And trust that it's gonna make it. Number one, because it's just a long journey. Yeah. Because I think it's like if it's not getting equipment from SA, then maybe you try to get something from Dubai, maybe you try to get something from Europe, right? But so not having access to certain warehouses, right? Like rental warehouses specifically. I know when I was in Kenya a month ago, they have some warehouses, right? So when something does happen, they can just go right down to the warehouse. So it makes it so much easier, the ease of doing business, right? And so I think when we're talking about on the continent about wanting to compete at an international level, there's nothing wrong with that, but we also have to be willing to come up to the international standards, right? And I think that becomes one of the major things is we get so excited about wanting to be competitive right now, but we also don't always acknowledge all of the infrastructural things that we need in order to make sure that it's sustainable, right? Because you can do something and it can be great right now, but will it be great in a year from now? Can you repeat it over and over again? So I would say for me personally, the number one thing is making sure that filmmakers or production houses that are coming in have access, because this is what international companies ask for, right? So for a company like mine, which is Paramount, which is what Yellowstone is on, if they were to come over and to do something, the first thing that they're going to say is like, well, how many warehouses are there? Or do we have to bring the entire container, right, to ship it over there? In which case we have to wait 4 months for a container to come, and that's just not conducive to being able to do something. So I think when we're looking at infrastructure, this is where government kind of comes in, because you can't get things into the country, right, without the border patrol and all these other things. So I think that's where building up the ecosystem properly really becomes very, very important.
Julia, you face this all the time. I mean, listen to his challenges of the facilities, the actual things, literally the cabling on the ground, right? The cabling, the rigging, the rigging instruments. Just down to sometimes even like a glue gun can also, if we don't have enough on set, you're in trouble, right? So I mean, what do you see as the biggest input when you are on location? Obviously, you've seen so many different locations, but I think over time, what was the biggest input? Has it been solved? But what is still outstanding that there's an opportunity for someone out there to say, well, hey, it looks like a business opportunity for me?
That's a good question. I think we're very lucky in Cape Town in particular that the services, the pre and post-production facilities, the equipment houses are first world. Yeah. So I think in terms of marketing Cape Town as an international destination, we're pretty much up there. We're launching an office in Mauritius that I think is going to prove challenging from as you mentioned, like they have it, but they don't have the expansive kind of, ticking every box sort of solution that we have here. Yeah. So that is going to create some challenges. Just on the note sort of locations, I mean, I've been to a lot of talks recently about AI. I am a little bit concerned about what's going to be created in the future in terms of locations and AI.
Yeah.
Apparently that's a way off, but I mean, I don't think any of us should ever sort of be, too complacent about that.
Yeah.
I've seen footage of what's happening in the UK with studios where they're creating locations on the backdrop. Admittedly, a lot of that is external locations, all on kind of green screens and stuff, but it will be interesting to see what happens in the next few years in terms of AI and locations.
What is generally most popular? I mean, apart from houses, when it comes to exteriors, what have you in your history seen as the most popular kind of location people are looking for that is consistent business?
Probably, I mean, it goes back to houses, but gardens are huge. So we get a lot of shoots in gardens. So, if a house has got a big, beautiful garden, that always works well. We've got a handful of them that just work like consistently throughout the year. But farms also are incredibly, we never have enough beautiful farms.
Okay.
So those are also dependent, a lot of them, on what time of the year. So for example, I've got some farm, like wheat fields, where they say, they want the wheat fields, but there's only a specific time of year where you can shoot where the wheat is actually, is there. But farms are always, we're always looking for more farms. So, and obviously in Cape Town, we're very lucky. I mean, the diversity of locations here is just so huge. I mean, you can go to the Atlantis dunes and you're in the desert. In the winelands, you're in France. We've got a huge range of architecture.
Yeah.
Which is so beautiful in the city. Modern beach houses, classic homes, modernist homes. I could just, but open spaces and farm roads also. I mean, sometimes shooting on a road in terms of the city, getting the police involved, traffic department, all of that can be a bit limiting. So if we've got private locations that offer roads, also all the better. Just gives them a level of freedom that they don't necessarily get.
Sure. I mean, so Captain America was shot in Nigeria, part of it. And what I love about, I think, the diversity of content right now is that it's not just one country. You've got scripts that run through different cities and different countries. I mean, you can, honestly, if you go home today and you watch any of the streamers, you will hear Morocco or you will see it written. You will hear Johannesburg or you will see it written. You will hear Nigeria, Lagos, you will see it written. And so what it's starting to say is that diversity is very important to the rest of the world, right? Such that there was that particular scene in Captain America, and when they had, I don't know if everyone's seen it, when Captain America and his opponent were they landed in the middle of a market in Nigeria, and watch it, you will see it.
Yeah,
so right?
It wasn't shot in
So
Nigeria.
exactly.
It wasn't.
Exactly my point.
Oh, right.
Right? It wasn't shot in Nigeria. So when it comes to cheat locations, what happens with the cheat locations in Nigeria? I mean, like you're speaking now, we got the winelands, and you're promoting Cape Town as south of France. French don't like that, but in Nigeria, Captain America was not shot in Nigeria, in Lagos.
It wasn't.
What was the knockback of that?
Look, to be honest, we were just happy that we had that representation on Captain America, really. And I think that's the opportunity that's there. You said it about the wineries and south of France. There's opportunity in Nigeria as well. We have rainforest, we have desert plains in the north. These are places that can also look like other places. As we all know, it's always, quote unquote, more affordable to shoot in Nigeria, right? Or to shoot in Africa. So there's opportunity to shoot in all these, beautiful landscapes that Africa can afford to provide. But, we just need more people to look this way, to come in with their budgets.
Yeah.
And also to tell our stories. I think that's the most important thing for us. We have so many stories that's not just poverty and AIDS. And I don't mean AIDS the disease, I mean AIDS like aid, right?
Aid. Assistance.
There's more to tell. There's more to tell. There's more that we have to give. it's always been within us. It's just how do we tell it well, you know, and that always comes down to funding. Funding is our biggest issue in Africa. And I think that once we have more people looking in and seeing the opportunity, it will continue to grow.
Do they use, are you aware of how many productions come in to Nigeria using it as a cheat location for somewhere else? Is it a regular thing?
I am not aware, no.
Not too sure, okay.
I'm not too sure.
Yeah, because I mean...
I think that's something that South Africa enjoys more.
Yeah,
Yes. I think it's maybe in recent times or in the near future, we'll see more of that happening with Nigeria.
I think
but
so.
I know that South Africa has enjoyed that for a couple of years now, yes.
I think so.
Because, Sorry, because we are shooting mainly international content.
Yeah.
Yes.
I always get homeowners, you know, sending me pictures of their home, and they live, you know, let's say in the southern suburbs, with this incredible view of Table Mountain. Or even on Bloberg, look at my view of Table Mountain. I say, sorry. They actually don't want to shoot the mountain.
They don't want to shoot the mountain?
No.
That's interesting.
They want to shoot spaces that are actually very generic. So can it be in the south of France? Could it be in France? Could it be on the dunes? You know, so in fact, I mean, we embrace it in a way because, as you say, so many international productions have come here, and we can fake any country in the world.
Yeah.
Like at CTICC, we become airports for anywhere in the world. You know, in Woodstock, we've lined the streets that, you know, used the old shops and lined the streets with dirt and have become Lagos. You know, so that is one of the things that, yes, it's not necessarily showcasing Cape Town, but it's one of the things that we embrace, that we actually can be anywhere.
Very true. So, I mean, talking about Mauritius, so Mauritius was recently used as New York. All right, so they shot, it was Jada Pinkett's film, and Resort to Love. And there's a scene where she's downstairs at her New York apartment, and there's snow on the ground, and she's making a decision to go to Mauritius for this whole thing, and it was literally shot in Mauritius with snow on the ground. Mauritius does not have snow, good people. It does not. I was there 3 weeks ago. But those are the kind of things that I think across the continent, and I think, Denim, you would attest to this, that we're able to cheat with the equipment that we have, with the skills that we have, to adapt into anything. And I think just your experience in trying to tell the rest of the world, I mean, have you ever been asked about shooting scenes in the films, in the productions you are in the US? When you try and promote Africa, what is the response rate?
Well, I mean, overall, the response is usually they just don't know what they don't know, right?
Okay.
And so there are undoubtedly, for an example, there's a show that Taylor Sheridan, who's the creator of Yellowstone, did a spin-off for in 1923. In 1923, there was locations here in Cape Town as well as in Nairobi in Kenya, and some of the outside places. And, you know, I had conversations with him about just the kind of the Africa of it all, right? So there is that. You know, one of the things I really wanted to touch on, she was mentioning as well, I think when it comes to locations, especially when it comes to filming for the continent, I think one of the harder parts that we want to also, that I'm very kind of cognizant about as well, is, you know, we oftentimes are always trying to promote this international, like we want attention internationally, and as long as we can get, you know, the US to come and Europe to come or Asia to come, if they can just come and they can just do this thing. And all that is great because they have a certain level of stability and a certain level of standard and professionalism. But also with that, there's a losing aspect sometimes for the country itself that they're coming to on the continent, because that money doesn't necessarily stay in the country, right?
Yeah.
So you can come in and it can be a great opportunity, right, where you can flood the market for a little bit, but then when the production's done, all of those resources go, right? And I think one of the biggest things, if you're here on the continent as a filmmaker, is being able to utilize these same types of locations, and you don't have have to cheat them, right? It doesn't have to be, or you can, right? You can create, you know, like in Botswana, it could be Texas, right? Like it's desert, it's dry. Like there's all of these different. I could easily create a whole Western series, and it could be taking place in Botswana, right? Like we have farms, we have a whole bunch of these different things. There's horses, right? So I think at the same way you can reverse engineer some of these things as well, right? Where you should be, we want to be learning from the things that they're doing, because the reason why they do it is because it's financially viable for them to be able to do that. And I think one of the bigger things as well, as we're constantly trying to tie these things together, is making sure that we are creating the right rebates and the right opportunities, right, for exportation of the content, right? So we're always concerned about, well, when the international people come in, how will they be treated? How will they be received? But then it's like we also have a tremendous amount of artists and content that's here on the continent, and they need to get their stuff out. So what incentives can we also help be creating to make sure? And one of the things I also, as I around the corner, is in the Delta, we have like world-class resorts there. But part of the ESG is that you can't build anything into the ground, right? So it's like everything is kind of elevated like these, right? So they're like posts that are in the ground, and so that they can be there for a certain period of time, and then they can just pick up and leave so that the ground can rest, right? So, but people still spend thousands of dollars a night to fly out there to these places, right? So they found a market, and they realized like, hey, we can still be in these amazingly vast locations, have world-class types of resorts and experiences, and can still kind of utilize the land to our benefit as well, and still make a lot of money doing it.
But this is just the beauty of every single major country, cosmopolitan country on the continent, that we have all these amazing tourism environments that are just not translating through to film. I don't know if there's any questions. Just put up your hands, and then we're really willing to take questions at any point in time. You've got a question? Is there a microphone? 1, 2.
Hi. So that came very off guard. I was still trying to formulate it, but I'll try figure out what it is. So you've got a writer, right? So let's say Azania's a writer. And then we've got Denim, who's a producer, and then we've got Julia, who's in the space, and then we've got Zulu, who might also be an executive producer, be it a director, or, you know what I mean, putting on any one of these positions. When Azania builds the world of the story, to say, okay, cool, maybe this is a township story, or this is kind of set up in a juxtaposition area where you've got a Santon and you've got an Alex, or you've got, I'm not sure if anybody else knows what Santon and Alex is, but it's basically bougie and not so bougie.
Yeah.
Who's making the final call in all those situations, right? So is that a director's position, whereas in this instance, is Julia looking at the script and saying, okay, cool, based on this world of the story, I can think of 1, 2, 3 ideas. Denim, these are the ideas that we can explore. Or who's the actual decision coming from in terms of how we building the world of the story? Because like you've described, you can take a certain area and create another area out of it, right? So who's making that call to keep to, in theory, Azania's world of the story in terms of what she envisioned when she was writing that actual script? Hopefully I'm coming off right.
I'm happy to answer that. Yeah. All right, go for it.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think I can answer that from a locations point of view. So we are pitching for jobs all the time. We work mainly with local production companies, but they pitch to the foreigners for the job. And often comes the storyboard or mood board or whatever will come to us, and then we have to pitch locations that we think will work. Very often, let's say they have like sometimes we get like a 70-page pitch of what they're needing in terms of locations. And really we feel quite responsible, even though we may not get a job out of that, we feel quite responsible as sort of custodians of this film industry in South Africa to entice a client to come to this country. So we will put together the best set of locations that we feel could work for that job. When they actually arrive here, they'll then shortlist 4 or 5 locations that they might think will work. But where we come in is the director might say, I want a modern kitchen. Let's say he's shooting, as you say, it can be like a kitchen that they're looking for. But very often my consultant Haley, who's so good at her job, will say, you know what, you wanting to shoot those angles, you wanting this is what you want, this is actually, I'm telling you, this is the best location for you. And I'm telling you why it's the best location for you. And I'm using a kitchen as example, but there could be many reasons why it's the best location. The director ultimately is going to make the decision. He's the one mandated to get that shot. So he's ultimately going to make that decision, but they will be swayed by what we suggest. And it can be around logistics, as you mentioned, like, is the location too small? Is parking a nightmare? Are the neighbors difficult? Like, these are all the things that we tell people about. And if they they want a night shot, and I know my neighbor's going to be screaming and calling the police. So there are a lot of things involved. But the very quick answer is the director makes the decision, but we have a very clear influence on what gets chosen.
It's collaborative in the end. The director will decide that this is what they prefer. Location manager, scouts would say, oh, look, this is what would happen if you chose this location. Executive producer would say, oh, well, this location, I would rather you got that other one because this is maybe more expensive, or maybe that location, I want to show that location in this film. I would prefer that is used, even if that one is more expensive. But in the end, everyone would talk about it and you choose, yeah.
Yeah, and also I think if the company's coming internationally, they're definitely going to lean on the people that are on the ground in the country far more, right? Because it's like, you don't know, you have an idea about a place or a location. You may see a house, but you don't know the area that the house is in, right? And so at that point, you really kind of, a good business decision, respectful good decision is just to lean on the people, right, that are there. I think it becomes a little bit more of a dialogue, right, if it's a local production, because then everybody has an opinion about that space. But especially if they're coming from overseas, they've never been there, they're always gonna just try to find the most competent agency, right, to be able to do that and trust that they're gonna know what the expectation is for this international company coming over here.
Yeah, cool. There's a question over there. Oh, there's two questions, one here and there's another one there. Okay.
Okay, so this is like a very interesting one with locations, especially in South Africa. I have a question. What measures are taken in place? For instance, you choosing something in the middle of Kruger National Park, right?
Yeah.
What do you do to, leave nature and leave the environment undisturbed once you enter, and then thereafter when you exit? Are there measures put in place to still remain sustainable and leave everything as what it was? How do you even, do that? Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of the places, right, like if you're going to a national park, they're not going to let you come in and just mow down half an acre, right, or a hectare of land, right? Like there's not going to be a thing. But this is where I was going back to, some of the structures and things like that are built. They have to be able to be, essentially structures like this, and then you can just pick them up, right? And then let that be what it is. Because in most of these places, that's what you really want to be making sure that you're doing. You want to make sure that you're able to go into these environments and that you're not destroying everything just for the sake of getting a shot, and then the animals and then the whole world is kind of destroyed. So usually, especially in national parks, they're very, they're very, very particular about how much it's kind of scary just to carry a camera in there, right? Because there's all these different things. So for sure, and then also as a company in general, a lot of these international corporations are corporations, right? So there are these giant brands that they are very exposed. And so to go into other countries, right, and have any type of negative PR, around whatever show or movie that they're doing, they definitely have a lot of measures, not only for the country itself, but internally, that oftentimes, and again, I'm speaking at the corporate level, not necessarily maybe always for if you're kind of an independent filmmaker, but if you're an independent filmmaker, it'll probably be a little bit more challenging to be able to go into a Kruger National Park, with 20 people and be able to do anything.
Yeah. The example I was given is Blood Diamonds. They had to do a whole 6 months to a year environmental impact study. They had to grid the environment, and get it right back to what it was, because there's indigenous trees, there's indigenous fauna, so there are some things you have to do. For instance, Brad Pitt's film, it was supposed to be shot in Morocco, but shot in Mexico. It was one of these kind of gladiators type films. I can't remember what it's called. They had cacti along the beach, and they had to grid every single cacti and replant it. Same thing with turtle eggs, and so there are processes in place, but it depends on whether the film really wants that location and how much they're willing to invest in that particular study, because government won't pay for that study. Yeah. There's a question?
Hi, so I'm a producing student at a local film school here. So I had a question about a producer's perspective, and then I've got a performance question for Mr. Richard. So for performance, I can appreciate you speaking to the technical aspects from the producing side of being on location for the production, all the technical aspects and planning towards that. But I was wondering, in your experience and your overall opinion, how beneficial is it for the actors to have exposure to the location prior to the first day of shooting? Like, how important is it for them to immerse themselves in that location?
Oh, no, yeah, it's vitally important, right? There's so many different elements. So for an example, the show that I'm on in the US is a Western show, right? So there's a lot of horses and cattle, and we're in the middle of nowhere, essentially, which you can argue in Montana. And so we usually have to go in about a week and a half before, and we do like a whole camp, like a cowboy camp, which is like a whole training, right? It's like a sports training thing where like you're getting back on the horses again, and you're getting around the cattle again and doing all these other things, because while you're shooting, you not only have the animal aspect, but now you have the crew, and then you have the cameras, and then we have helicopters, and then we have drones. And so you have to now get very comfortable now being on these animals, not only when they're by themselves, but now while you're on them, when they're now surrounded by crew members and cameras and all of these other elements, sometimes helicopters, and then it's raining or then it's snowing. So it's really, really important for any type of production house to allow artists, especially in those worlds, to be able to do it, because your body changes, your mind changes, your emotions change, right? So there's a lot of visceral things that are really, really necessary. So I think any production that allows you to get into those spaces before, whether it's a period piece or not, it's not the same thing as like shooting on a soundstage, right? Where you're just gonna come in, you're shooting day for night anyways, it doesn't really matter. But anything that has to do with the elements, you're usually always gonna have to be able to have access to the space way before.
Okay, thank you. So just so open to the whole panel, you've all mentioned the benefits, the advantages and disadvantages of international companies coming in to use African locations as cheat locations. But I was wondering what your overall opinions or thoughts were for if that just becomes the standard to come in and use a cheat location. Because as you said, the advantage is that, it boosts tourism, they're exposed to lots of lovely cultural elements, but then also there's like, as you said, there's no camera for hire shops around. So what were your guys' overall opinions of if that becomes the standard?
You want me
to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's this reality, right? So I think sometimes it's like you gotta pick your evil at a certain point. But I think it's really up to the companies that are here, right? And making sure that we ourselves, whether you're doing it through certain aspects of government or certain business opportunities, right, through your production houses, is creating enough incentives and enough leverage so that when these companies come in, you have certain standards that they have to then be able to meet as well, right? Instead of just being so excited that they're here, like, look, they're here, and we get to like market it. It doesn't, but it also has to translate, right? Part of an industry is that if there's sustainability, that there's jobs, that there's opportunities, right? And so I don't necessarily think that it's something that needs to kind of keep going on for the future. I think that we know about it, we've seen it. There's people here that are benefiting from those things as well, right? But I also know that there's a lot of opportunities also to begin to focus more inward, right? And also be looking at the opportunities that we have to be able to export from the outside. But then anybody that comes in, we can also say, hey, look, part of that needs to be some capacity building. Some of that needs to be like, hey, do you guys have maybe older even, I mean, again, this gets into the argument of aid and all these other things, and we can have a conversation about that. But there, you know, cameras are changing every single year, right? And most people have never had an opportunity to learn on a Blackmagic or a Red camera. And there's a lot of production houses all over the US and Europe that have a lot of camera equipment that's just sitting there. That also can be something that, you know, you can also have as well as teaching tools and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities that we could begin to explore, but it starts with the internal conversations before we're looking for external people to solve internal problems.
You want to say something?
No, I think it's, I think leveraging off the fact that we are so popular, particularly in Cape Town, for the internationals coming in, is never something we want to turn away. But I mean, as you spoke about, I think it would be so amazing if we were producing a lot more local content. And I mean, that speaks to, you know, what you were saying as well. I just think there's so many opportunities here to be creating more local content. I mean, what amazes me about you is you're producing local content that's being consumed locally. I think we just have so many opportunities here to be doing that. And luckily, I mean, I think there's, if those two things could work together really well, it would be magical.
Yes, because like you said, we shouldn't just be excited.
Yeah.
You know, even though it is very exciting, to be very, no, I would be very serious because for Nigeria, we are literally building our industry ourselves.
Yeah. By
ourselves. It's in recent times that we started to see some commitment from international spaces. We are building ourselves. I know that in Kenya market is built on aid, right?
Yeah.
They do a lot of documentaries. Sure. South African market, a lot of co-productions, or even just them coming here to, South Africa to shoot. We have built it ourselves, and it's a struggle.
Yeah.
So seeing value attached to our work is exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we're happy that that door is open. Now, when they come in, the conversations need to change to what he's talking about, where the incentives are there to keep them doing things that would grow the business to a sustainable state, and not just have them come in here and then the resources are taken back and there's nothing left for Africans. And most importantly, what we're trying to do, I think what most Nollywood practitioners are trying to do, is to get our voices, our stories told on a global stage. And it's extremely difficult to do it from inwards outwards, right? Without some sort of ally, so to speak. So, I mean, it's exciting times, and we hope that we need government support, right, for those incentives. How many countries in Africa actually give? Thank you. Yeah. Out of 54, just like 3. You know, so why would anybody stay?
Good question.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Hadiza Ibrahim. I'm a media producer, filmmaker from Nigeria. I think this is very interesting conversations that we're having with regards to locations, and I say this because we're seeing location play a more and more important role as a character in, you know, film and TV content. I know that when we produce works like Real Housewives of Lagos or movies, you know, we think of Lagos as a character, and we think of Lagos, you know, having the representation, so that when you're watching the content, it's not just in the music or the food or the dress that you know that this is Lagos. You also know that this is Lagos from the picture. And Inkblot Productions, they're doing, you know, incredible work. Up north, for instance, showcased and marketed that side of Nigeria in a good light. But I think also the cheap nature of, you know, swapping locations, I feel it also raises a bit of moral question, not just because we expect, I believe that location is also a, call it if you like, an opportunity to showcase a country, an opportunity to to see the beauty of that country. So if you then come to shoot in a particular locality and you swap out everything and you then make it another location, for me, especially when that then becomes the consistent thing or modus of practice, the question then becomes, at what point do we celebrate that location for what it is? If every time I see this beautiful landscape, which is actually Cape Town or which is Ekiti State in Nigeria, it's been swapped to represent another country, you know, what does that do for the audience? What does that do for storytelling? What does that do for the representation of that particular locality?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes, right, it ties into, like, you know, what we're talking about, where it becomes kind of sometimes these lesser of these two evils sometimes that you have to be thinking about, right? Because on one hand, some of those things of setting that standard, especially when it comes to locations, especially if they're more historical locations, those also come from government, right? And the ease of being able to kind of get in and be able to do those things, but then also making sure that you're not kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face, because we can say, well, we only want to use this tree to represent whatever South Africa, and it needs to be that, but then you have 5 different productions internationally that want to pay money to come in and do that, but then you don't have any other sources of money that's coming in locally. So it becomes one of those things where I think it's where you have to be able to kind of merge the two for a little bit until you start to create a little bit more value add locally, right? Because sometimes it becomes one of those things where, what do we do? Do we say morally we want to sit here and we want to go let this water bottle just be the water bottle? Or if there's 5 other countries that want to come in and say that it's Coke, let them come in and say that it's Coke. Like what do we care? We got to get paid, we got to do things. And companies that are coming internationally, that's one of the things that I'm also talking about, is that they don't have a vested interest overall to think about how the Nigerians or the Botswana or the South Africans feel about whether or not we're taking this tree and making it something that it's not, right? Because they have a business. And so their business isn't emotional, their business is to do the business and to create the story. And this happens to be the best location for them in their mind in this moment to be able to do that. So I think based on some of the things that you're saying, that the emotional aspect, especially as a continent, when we're looking at it from, we want our stories to be told internationally, the only people that are going to do that and respect it with the same moral authority that you're doing is going to be you, right? It's going to be us. So to then, when you're looking for the outside to come in and do that, they don't have the same type of a moral authority or thought process or emotional state to care. There's no history. It's not tied to anything. It's a location, right? And it just makes sense on the bottom line. So I think that's where I'm talking about local productions getting more involved in what that is, so that the more value add that you bring in, the more leverage that you have, so that you don't run into those types of issues. But right now, if it's making money, you can't turn the faucet off, because how are you going to pay anybody else? At least it's something right now.
Yeah, like there is a lot more diversity in script coming in. You have the consistent kind of reminder that cities are important as landmarks, right? Even if sometimes the city's actually not being used. Okay, so you got the classic Wakanda example of them saying it's somewhere in Africa when a thing is shot halfway across the water in Mississippi, right? But again, it's like he's saying, is it really comes down to a couple of things. So when you are out there in the rest of the world and you're promoting Africa as a filming destination, it's not only for us to keep saying, no, come and use it as. It's put it in your script, because especially for Johannesburg, spaces like that, we have yellow traffic light poles, okay? To edit that thing out is such a job, okay? So it's having to then, when we speak about shooting on location in Africa, actually saying, if you use its authenticity, it saves so much more money in post-production, because first of all, maybe they're driving on the other side of the road. Now you're not having to edit out the fact that the arrow is in one direction. You're not having to get there and having to repaint the road. It's the way that we as Africans speak about our location to the rest of the world, and how we promote it as a storyline for it to become easier. It's okay to say Lion's Head. All right, it's okay to say that, but we're just not loud enough sometimes, I think, to be able to tell that story. But what I'm going to do now, because I think this is such an important conversation, and it's very unfortunate we don't get to speak about our locations, but we're going to have to round up. So, you've got at least Denim, and we've got Zulu here for the whole few days. I don't know if Julia, if she's going to be around, but you'll find us in different spaces. But I'm just going to round up with everyone here first. Zulu, on your parting shots, what do you hope for the promotion of Nigeria as a destination of preference in the context of Africa?
I hope for that to happen. I hope that not just Lagos is promoted, because Lagos seems to be the only place that gets all of that. To be honest, there are so many more beautiful states out of the 36 states we have. I hope that when they do come, we are able to utilize these international, experienced crew members. We're able to tap into their skill set. We're able to utilize their resources as well, and grow ourselves and grow our industry. Because, like I was saying, I almost got a little bit emotional earlier, because it's really hard. I'm tired of I just want to make films. I'm tired of having to think of everything else, But we have to do that, because that's what we're trying to do. We're building an industry, so we'll do it. And I just hope that when we have people come into Nigeria to shoot, either as a cheat location or as Nigeria, that we're able to get the full benefit of that relationship.
Fantastic. Julia, on your side, what is next? We have Mauritius coming up. Where else would you love to kind of set up shop on the continent?
I didn't have plans until I met Zulu and chatted about Nigeria, so I think there's some opportunities. I have thought about going into other areas in Africa. The problem is obviously the costs of going out there, but maybe with these collaborations we can look. But I think what I'm particularly passionate about is that, as you spoke about, bringing foreigners to this country and showcasing what Africa has to offer. And I think if we can, my passion has always been creating an incredibly professional platform for people to go and find their right space, and then have it be managed in such a way that their production is seamless.
Yeah.
From a location point of view, that we have ticked every box, we've given them all the information they need to have a seamless experience.
Right.
And if I can expand that into Africa, I think that would, I think, as you know, Mauritius is my next step.
Yeah.
And I'm just passionate about showcasing this part of the world.
It's amazing, right? Denim.
Sorry, I'm curious. Why Mauritius?
Funny enough, because one of my South African contacts has been there for 5 years, and he contacted me and said they're shooting all the time in Mauritius, and there's no such thing as a location agency there. So there's a big opportunity there right now to just roll out my model into that destination.
Oh, fantastic.
But also they have amazing incentives.
Yeah.
They've got huge incentives. South Africa has an incentive, Mauritius has an incentive of 40% rebate, and additional on top of that, another 40%. Or if you have a
local
Mauritian business who partners with you, they get a tax rebate. So they've got beautiful incentives as well in Mauritius. Denim, from your side, what do you hope from an equipment, from a facilities point of view, for us to grow in that environment? What is your hope?
You just have to do it, right? So you just have to do it. So if you want the equipment, figure out a way to go get the equipment, right? I think for me, I really take more of an approach of less of like, hopefully somebody from the outside will come in and do it. Hopefully government maybe at one point will do it. Like nobody has time, right? So it becomes, you have to be more proactive. And it's like you said, right? Like it can become exhausting, but this is what happens when you're building something, right? And so you kind of just pray for strength, right? Constantly, because the reality of it is that this is a part of ownership,
Yeah.
right? And so this is, you take pride in the work that it is,
Yeah.
and take pride in the fact that it's a struggle, but the struggle is only going to be temporary. So if you want more stories to be told on the continent, then tell the stories, and don't allow all of these other factors always be the thing. Don't let it be because government doesn't create enough incentives, and that means it's an incentive for you to go to the private corporations, right, and do it. For an example, quickly as I close, it's like you can say like, oh, well, what about lodging opportunities? Well, you can go to lodges and you can say, hey, look, this is part of your like R&D of your business, right, your research and development, and say, look, 50% of your year is nothing's happening, right? So all of your doors are dormant. Let me have those doors at 50%, right? And we'll do this. We'll boost your hospitality industry and this, that, and the third. It's the same type of an incentive that you would have gotten if you had gone through government, but you have to go and do it.
Right.
So for me, if there's a door to be knocked on, you go and knock on it. And along the way, if you start to meet people that also want to knock on some doors with you, then great. And if not, don't worry about it.
So, locations starts to open up our minds, right? And the fact is, 70% of your production budget is spent shooting. So it's looking into what we said, what we've spoken about, that this is in itself its own industry. And spread the word out there that there's opportunity in the value chain across everything from the camera equipment, to the skills on the ground, to the catering that's there, to the homes that are used, to the windows that are chosen as part of a scene. Look into it. If you want to know more, thank you to the partnership with MIP, with Locations Africa, for us to do this. We have a conference coming up on 5th and 6th of October, streaming live from Johannesburg. If you want to know more about actually being part of the locations environment, you know, sign up, locationsafrica.com, in partnership with the MIP family. We will go in depth into the realities of shooting, the legalities, the financing around it. So please join us there. But thank you so much to my panel, and please give them a huge round of applause. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.